The best part of the day, our keynote speaker. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Raphael Hofstein, President and CEO of Mars Innovation. Dr. Hofstein has been a driving force in biotechnology for more than 30 years, and we are very happy to have him with us today. He started his career at Biotechnological Applications Limited and the International Genetic Scientific Partnership, two organizations that were pivotal in the development of Israel's world-leading biotech sector. His impressive resume includes positions with Ecogen Inc., MindSense Biosystems Limited, Medica Ventures, and Hadasit Bioholding Limited. He is also the co-founder of the Israeli Life Science Organization and Israel's Tech Transfer Network. Please welcome Dr. Raphael Hofstein.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, the last speaker always has a dilemma, because everything he wants to say has already been said for him. But since I am the keynote speaker, I have to say something. And since it is an innovation forum, I decided to become innovative. And I'll take the next 20 minutes to explain to you why I think that the Bulls beat the Raptors last night. But it's just the beginning. I mean, the season is still a long season. Anyway. So, I already benefited from coming down to Chicago because during the panel, a few things came up, and I'm sure that they will become the buzzers. So Steve suggested that it's all about crap. I sit on a very special council called the Ontario Health Innovation Council, and we are supposed to submit our recommendations for how to go about innovation in healthcare to the government next week. And we have a bottleneck. We don't know, out of the 50 different description of innovation, which one to pick. Now I know. We'll take this one. It's all about crap. The second suggestion was made by Kenneth about sustainability, because everybody wants to thrive to sustainability. He suggests that it has to sustain. I totally agree with him. Last but not least, Martin, you suggested, and I totally agree with you, that if there's no conflict, there's no interest, and I totally believe in it. And in terms of addressing all of that together, the federal government of Canada felt that we got to do something. And we believe that we are in par of the Ivy League of the academic world. We compare ourselves to the Bay Area and the Boston area and the Chicago area. But when it comes to commercialization, not quite. So we have to do something. And that came up as a decision strategically going about commercialization back in 2007. And I have to make sure I move my slides. And there was a call for everybody who thinks that they have great ideas, innovative ideas about how to go about accelerating commercialization of academic ideas. And they created something that's called the CSER. By the way, those of you who know Canada, it's all about acronyms. So CSER holds for Centers of Excellence in Commercialization and Research. And there were 100 ideas, over 100 ideas of how to go about it. And 11 were the first cohort who got funded. One of them is the group that is located in downtown Toronto. And before I describe to you what it means, I have to ask a question. How many of you had at least one opportunity to engage a tech transfer office in their ideas? How many of you tried to combine two offices because sometimes you need to bundle? You did. I will not ask the third question because Dana already alluded to the fact that it's not terribly enjoyable. And I'm in trouble because I've done it for 20 years representing one academic institution in Israel, and I realized that we have a flaw in the system because the classical way of doing it really does not work well. And just one example as to why it doesn't work well anymore, at least. You remember in the early days, all we need to do, those of you familiar with academic tech transfer, prepare one glossy page, send it to Baxter, and with a letter says, Baxter, develop the product. When it gets to the market, please start sending royalties back to us. End of discussion. Nowadays, you send the glossy page to them, they come back with a letter saying, wow, this is really exciting. Keep going, because eventually it will come up our alley and we will join you in terms of development. And between this and that, we have what everybody talks about. We used to call it the chasm, because it's a sophisticated term. What it really means is that it's the valley of death. In trying to address the situation, we took advantage of the geographic arrangement in downtown Toronto, which is U of T, University of Toronto, 9 teaching hospitals that are affiliated to U of T, plus Ryerson University, York University, and a few academic institutions, a total of 15, got together to create a one-stop shop, one that can address the academics' need as well as the needs of the industry. And the story I'm going to tell you is about a Caesar that was created around this being a one-stop shop for academic research. So I thought that I'm going to be creative today because I meant to tell you that I'm a bridge. So Canan already took this privilege from me because she said she's a bridge. The difference is that you bridge over water and I bridge over a valley of death. A little bit of a difference. And this is really what Mars Innovation is all about. There is great academic work being done. And Martin and I over coffee already discussed the fact that we know how to overcome conflict of interest if we are interested in promoting our ideas to the market and mainly to patients' bedside. And then there is the right-hand side, which is the capital world and the strategic world, and Mars Innovation is really the bridge. So everybody mentioned this morning that they know of the Tech Transfer Office of MIT and of Harvard. This is kind of the genre. They all talk about tech transfer, they mean MIT and Stanford. What does it take to be able to join the Ivy League in terms of tech transfer? It's all about deal flow. Because they have educated their faculty and students to disclose, and therefore the deal flow is robust. Others still need to wait for a more creative approach. Our creative approach is really to create this one-stop shop that I already mentioned to you. So over 5 years, we educated our institutions, the 15 institutions, that we will do a good job in terms of addressing their needs, and it got from 20, 30 a year to over 300 disclosures a year. So why is it so important? Because think of it this way. If you have only 30 disclosures coming to an office, only 10% really makes sense, at least when we talk about the low-hanging fruit. By the way, a term I learned since I came to Canada. So my arithmetic will say 10% is only 3. Usually, you have 1 of 3 to succeed. You're left with 1. So you run a business around 1 disclosure that has maybe a chance to get through the hurdles. But if you start with 300 and your stock is 30 a year, you can start talking business, and I'll get to the business in a minute. So indeed, over time, we built a portfolio. We have now over 100 projects under management. And these are representative of the 10% or so that are allowing us to have a dialogue with the rest of the world. But I already mentioned to you the one-pager that doesn't work. This trick doesn't work. So we have to remain creative in the way we do the business. And rather than sending glossy pages to Pfizer, Baxter, AbbVie, etc., getting them back, we decided to add another layer in the way we go about early-stage tech transfer, and we become active as company creators. Not because we think that every scientist should own a company. even though some of them got excited about it. But I'm telling you that there is a baggage of hurdles going with it. But because of the fact that we have to respond to the dynamics of the financial world. A typical VC or an angel investor will not bring their money to the tax transfer office. Reason is not because they don't trust us, simply because they don't know where the money goes. They need to know that there is a carve out around the package of IP so that here is IP, here's my contribution, here's what I can expect to get at the end of the day. And the only way that at least I know of how to go about it is by company creation. And of the 100 projects that we have under management, we created 37, and it's a formidable undertaking, and I will tell you how we go about this piece. To be able to do this, I already mentioned the federal government. As you know, in Canada, we don't call them the states, we call them the provinces, simply because of the fact that the governor of Canada works for the Queen. So he cannot be the governor of a state. So we call them the premiers of provinces. So between the federal government and the province of Ontario, they take good care of us. And I think that this is really an important message. And I know that at least the governor who preceded the current one knows about it because he came to visit us 2 years ago, and we explained why we believe that government interference is absolutely critical. And I can tell you, after 30 years of working in that space, and by the way, they call it my sweet spot, which sometimes is bitter, that without government interference, things will not move forward, it will not go anywhere. So in my interaction with the government, they always say, and you're familiar with it, this is public-private sector interaction. And what they really mean by that is that they will give the ideas, and then we have to go to industry and get the financial support. Guess what? Industry is not ready at the early stage for significant financing, and I'll get back to it in a minute. So the good news about the Caesar program is that if you become one, you can expect to be funded for a period of 5 years in a decent way. Like in the United States, also in Canada, it has to be matched up with other people's funds. And what's nice about the 15 institutions that they realized that this is an opportunity, and they volunteered, quote unquote, to pay annual fees up to the level of the government support. So we were funded for 5 years, 15 from the government, 15 from the members, and after 5 years, they wanted us to become sustainable. So we went back and said, look, we represent a portfolio in medical sciences. Between the time that it takes to do the mouse study, and then comes the rat study, and then comes the monkey study, and then comes phase 1 and phase 2, it takes at least 5 years. How can you expect us to be sustainable? And it went back and forth, and finally we got extended for another 5 years, which is where we are now. So this is a 10-year program, well funded by government and the member institutions. However, if I come back in 3 years to you, guaranteed I'll have to be in position to tell you that we are sustainable. How do we go about it? Just quickly, because this is detailed. Mars Innovation is a very useful and proactive organization, but not inexpensive. In every asset that we promote, we will take 25%, regardless of whether it's royalties or equity in companies that we create. Why do we believe that it's not a deal breaker? Because afterwards, we all get diluted according to the rules of the world, so we are together with the founding scientists in it. Everything I described to you so far is about what we call the front end of the business, essentially addressing the ideas, creating a dynamic deal flow. And the 300 disclosures every year come to my office. I have a team of 15 people working with me, and just quickly to tell you, because we have a very structured way of going about it, we have 45 days that we can engage with each and every disclosure. And in the 45 days, we have to do two things. Number one, we have to assess whether we're dealing with strong or potentially strong intellectual property. And let me explain. in a usual setting of a tech transfer office where there's limited resources, what we usually used, at least in my experience, what we usually used to do is we go to a law firm and say, hey, here's $1,000, why don't you do what we call a quick and dirty provisional filing so that at least I can publish tomorrow morning. Because remember, for the scientist, publication is key. 5 years later, Pfizer comes back and says, wait a minute, this provisional, let us know where it's dented, there's prior art, there's all sorts of things, and it doesn't make sense because in the end, the technology gets stuck. With a Mars innovation approach, where we have the funds and we have the skill set, we can address this issue of quality of IP in 45 days. We have a very strong engine that allows us to do this, and the chance of bouncing back is probably minimal. So that's number one. Number two, this is where industry comes to the play. We engage them right from the get-go. And this is a strong recommendation to everybody who is interested in playing in this space. I can tell you that based on our experience, it's very difficult to get them to sign hefty checks at the early stage, but they're willing to share with us their experiences. And this goes back to this notion of the push and the pull. In the early days, like 20, 30 years ago, we knew everything. We were the ones who understood what the market needs, and we decided that we will push everything into the market. A new industry have to appreciate our perception, and you're going to trust us. Over time, we realized that this approach is not the right approach. And over time, and I don't know if you agree with that, we started to understand that we better focus on pull. Talking to you, you were on the panel. And so there is a very clear switch from push to pull. And I have to tell you that, again, based on my own experience, in the past, we refrained from sharing with industry our secrets because, God forbid, if they take it away from us. I want to guarantee you, because it is so early, they will not take anything from us. But at the same time, if we open the kimono to them and we explain to them what exactly we are trying to accomplish, we can get a very strong ally of someone who understands what the market is looking for, what's needed, and how to go about it. So we created with many of them what we call a framework fund. And in the framework fund, and I can give you the example of Baxter because this is one we signed about 2 years ago. And before I go there, I want to tell you that it's an interesting story about a legendary Norbert Riedel from Baxter, who came to see us. I knew him for many, many years, who came to see us in Toronto. And he says, Rafi, by the way, the reason why we came goes as follows. We didn't know how to deal with tech transfer offices. So we decided to do a pilot. But I instructed my team to do it only in our neighborhood. University of Chicago, Northwestern, and maybe one or two others. That's it. But then I opened the map. I realized that Toronto is in the neighborhood. So I came to see you. And the reason I feel that our approach of having a one-stop shop with a deal flow, and deal flow that is opened to industry for review and selection works is simply because Norbert, at the end of the day, he spent with us, says to me, Rafi, this is the way to go about tech transfer moving forward, and I think that I cannot argue against Norbert Riedel. So the way it works is really that if one of the strategic globals come to us and they are willing to have access to the portfolio, we will open an account for them. And it can be 500K, it can be $1 million, some of them even suggested 2 million. But on the condition, speaking of put your money where your mouth is, that Mars Innovation is going to match up to them. So it's a pool of money that's available for what we call the POP, the Proof of Principle Program. And they will come once in a while for a beauty contest, and if they choose something that they want to invest in the early stage, they will point out, and it pretty much forces us, Mars Innovation, to match up to them. And I have to tell you that it created tremendous amount of successful deal flow, and the dynamic works like a charm. Another element that came out of it is that, I hope I'm not offending anybody who is from the scientific territory here, people realized that over time they have to improve the way of presenting to industry. When an industry rep comes, they don't really want to understand, to listen to the energy between the C and the N bond. They really want to hear what you, the founder, have to say in terms of the idea, how you're going to develop it, and why there is benefit to the world from what you're doing. And it was a very interesting training, because at the beginning, it was like talking to death. And over time, we noticed that there is an exponential improvement in terms of the dialogue. And one additional benefit to it is that since they realized that we created a certain culture around the interface between the academic world and the industrial world, that they now come much more oftenly. And we allow them to do what used to be very dangerous. We call it walk the hall, establishing a proactive approach. And the reason why that is important, I'm sure you will appreciate it, is that not always does a scientist know that what they are investigating has benefit to the rest of us. But it's through a dialogue with an industry rep that ideas come up. And if we agree that there's no fear of stealing ideas, that the dialogue becomes extremely productive. And I can give you a number of examples. Certainly Baxter is one. I'm told that AbbVie is coming to visit us early next year, and we have a very successful relationship that's been built around Celgene, not to mention Pfizer, GSK, who became a traditional visitor, and they all come for beauty contest, no strings attached. It's only to be able to share the beautiful ideas. So I already talked to you about the portfolio and 100 project under management. And I already explained to you that much of it goes in the direction of company creation. So what we offer to our scientists is that we will take care of the less exciting elements in terms of how to start a company, how to run it, at least for the first year or two, how to raise seed money, seed capital for it, and so on and so forth. So what you see here comes to show that we are covering the entire spectrum in medical sciences. And here is another point to be mentioned, which is that because of the fact that we are a one-stop shop, we do not have the privilege of telling them, well, this and that doesn't come up our alley because we don't have the expertise. This is something that is unacceptable. If we don't have the expertise, better have the expertise, better hire the expertise. So what you see here is really the whole spectrum from drug discovery through diagnostic, medical device, and e-health. And by the way, part of the beauty of doing it this way is that we get to see everything. And now comes a new element which was almost unheard of in the past, and that is clustering of ideas. And in many situations, so there's two elements to it, the practical aspect of it and the more strategic element to it. Because everybody is looking at a fairly narrow aspect. And I know, Ken, I don't know if you need other people's expertise, but I'm sure you do. In the past, it would have been very difficult, at least at the level of the tech transfer office, because, oh my goodness, someone is going to ask to share my outcome of it. Impossible. That's the only way that it can be possible. And the big guys of industry will appreciate it because it saved them a lot of the headache that goes with around risk mitigation. Clustering is absolutely useful approach to risk mitigation. And this is in an era that almost everybody is risk averse. So when we talk about us being the bridge, being able to mitigate the risk through clustering works very nicely. So what we do is really, we look at it, A, from institutional perspective, because we represent all of them. So we know what happens in one hospital and why another hospital can do it. Sometimes it's two pieces of technologies. Sometimes it's a piece of technology that needs validation that is available in another hospital. And we make sure that everybody gets their fair share if there is something to be shared. At the same time, we can combine aspects of technology in the interface between the three. And I can tell you that we have some very powerful examples of how it works, and again, it's a very efficient way of going about the business. We are not only about medical sciences, as I said before, we don't have the privilege of ignoring everything else, so we have one division, even smaller, even though smaller, in the so-called physical sciences, so we have people who are dealing with clean tech, solar energy, and other aspects of science, but the majority is still in life sciences. If you wonder, if you worry that we don't have wearables, we do have tons of them. So how does it work? Let me just summarize in a schematic way. So the first thing is obviously discovery. And over coffee, we already talked about it, that there's nothing to be fearful about. And I mentioned to you that if someone comes to me around midnight and said, look, I got to protect my idea by a patent because tomorrow morning the publication comes out of embargo. Can you do something for me? The answer is yes. If we understand the need, there's got to be a way to address, and no one can tell me that a tech transfer office is an impediment to scientific publications. It's just a matter of attitude. And there's always a mechanism now in an electronic world, even more so, that if you come to me at midnight, I will take care of your provisional, and then you can take it off embargo tomorrow morning. However, having said it, sometimes people come to me and say, well, you know, you can file for a patent because all I did is have 2-sentence abstract to a conference. Those of you who've been in the trenches understand that even half a sentence that says it all will jeopardize a patent. So let's have an allied arrangement between the office and the scientists so that we all benefit. So it all starts with discovery. And maybe one, how are we doing for time, about discovery. So there's always a dilemma as to whether we should allow scientists to continue and follow their passionate interest in science. Or shall we direct it? I will argue that allow them to do it, because only by strictly doing discovery work will we be able to provide Boston Scientific and others with great ideas into the future. And they mentioned Avalanche about the polymers. Polymer technology came out of discovery, so I would suggest, I will argue that we should encourage them to continue discovery. They have to disclose it to us, and God forbid if they're missing the timing. Timing is all about timing, so make sure that you're bringing it to our attention at the right timing. We will do the assessment as I described to you, and we have only 45 days. So people ask me, what happens when you don't take it on board and you decline? When we decline, just quickly, we send it back to the tech transfer office of the individual institutions, and usually they will send it back to the founding scientists and say, look, we tried our best, it's all yours, you can run with it. So this is about the assessment. Funding at the stage that we have to move from academic discovery to translational research is probably the #1 and the deepest value of that. Because nowadays, unless you show some in vivo data, the chance of starting a dialogue is almost nil to none. And to be able to do that, and we all know how difficult it is to get a translational research funding from government institutions, we have to figure out how to do it. I already mentioned to you the trick that we have with the framework fund with industry. I can tell you that the governments are starting to understand it. The new kid around the corner is a so-called industry of angel investors, people who are curious, passionate, and also have excess amount of cash that are willing to put to work and willing to take a risk. But POP funding is absolutely key to our business. Once we pass that stage and the data is compelling, the next one is to consider how we go about it. I'm not suggesting that we ignore licensing, because if Baxter comes to us and say, here is a license and we're willing to pay you $5 million upfront payment, trust me, we'll take it. But they don't. So the only plausible alternative is really to start a company, go back to the angels, go back to the VCs, and the VCs are the ones who, the ones we talk about are the ones who are entertaining seed stage, because, you know, it's also layered. And the classical VC will say, well, unless you show me data at phase 3 or you have significant sales, I'm not talking to you. So we now recognize that there is a layer of the seed stage, and thank you very much for that. And then comes industry traction. And there's, by the way, a very interesting term that has been developed recently, at least by one West Coast venture fund called Versant. They call it build to buy. So build to buy is a very interesting notion which we use quite often now, essentially saying we will invest on the condition that we already have a buyer at the end of the tunnel. So getting industry traction, remember I told you beforehand, let's open the kimono because eventually it will pay off. This is where it pays off, because they are with us along the way. They know exactly what the good news and the bad news is, and they know how to guide us. So when it comes to industry traction, the dialogue with them becomes relatively easy. And if all goes well, then it goes to them, and then the glossy page becomes a useful page. I could spend, I mean, my flight takes off in 2 hours. I could talk to you either on the Raptors or the portfolio in the next 2 hours, but I suspect that everybody has to go for TGIF. So I'll stop here and happy to take questions. Like everything else, it's about education. And in the beginning, I heard quite often, so what's your value add? And the only answer I had was, how about if I cover all your IP costs? And so at the beginning, you know how it works. When you do the provisional, it's usually $1,000 now, it's $5,000. Everybody can do that. And then start showing up the real bills. And it's an expensive exercise. And you never know that it will pay off. So how about that? But I think that it goes beyond it, and success begets success. So I think that over time, with everything we did, people come to us quite readily.
So I think this makes a lot of sense for technology transfer. Do you think there's a model here between public-private industry for startups and innovation that are happening outside the academic community?
So the answer is yes, it's fairly generic. The problem is that when someone starts a company and they think that this is going to be the most disruptive idea since sliced bread, and they're not going to allow anybody to take a piece of the pie. I hate to say that, but there's a little bit of greed in it, right? So if everybody understands that at the end of the tunnel there's enough for all of us, then I would suggest that it's generic. Please.
I'm also intrigued by the disclosure comments and completely buy into the increased productivity and increased chance you got something out the other end. My question is, do you see exception to that, where you say, this is really a juicy idea, we better not be telling people until we develop it a little further?
No. I don't think, quite frankly, I don't think there is these types.
Hi. Relative to proof of concept, how diverse does your proof of concept set of experiences need to be? In other words, you know, doing an N of 1 isn't what I would call proof of concept.
So, you know, it's really, first of all, it's a very interesting question, and different people have different views of what proof of principle is, right? So I want to give you an example, which is kind of contemporary. We have one company, and in that company, we know how to cyclicize every peptide, a company called Encycle, for obvious reasons. By the way, we're not too good in names. We spent a lot of time and a lot of government and angel money to get to the point that we have enough data to package it and go with it to venture capitalists. And we got excited. And they got excited. But here comes the difference. The guy says to me, you know, this is really revolutionary. This is going to be a game changer in everything we do, because not only are you telling me that it recognizes target, it also knows how to get into the cell. How about if you demonstrate to me that it's orally available? And I look at the guy and I say, wait a minute, you gotta be kidding me. What you are asking me to do is gonna take at least 2 years and at least $2 million. This, to him, is proof of principle. Does that answer your question? Sort of. So, I guess, I mean, to be more to the point, I will argue that we have to do everything we can to get to the point that the package is attractive enough to the next in line. It's all about the bridge and transferring the baton to the next in line. And yes, it gets tougher and tougher and tougher, but I have to tell you, based on a few examples, it works.
Raphael, it looks like, you know, proof of principle is obviously the key to bridging the major gap in the value of that. But it looks like you have a pretty good assessment model. What do you put into your assessment model to get to that point? Because there's obviously a lot of companies that you're dealing with, and you're selecting a few.
Right.
How do you do that?
So, again, it comes back to the way you fund it. And I remember my days as a tech transfer officer in an office that had virtually no resources. And everything we did was, you know, what we could do from today till tomorrow. When you're well funded, and that's the beauty of this particular approach, you can A, cover the cost of IP, and number two, you can hire the best and the brightest as outsourced experts. And as you know, these guys are very expensive. We have the privilege of hiring the better ones, and at the same time, because we represent the resources, we can dictate to them how they're going to go about what we need. So I have a team, and we do the initial screening, but we will never move forward without hiring an outsourced expert for that. So I have to say that usually I summarize my presentation by saying, come land on Mars, and that would have been a sensational statement. Now that people are wanting to land on comets, I don't know what to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Raphael. That's awesome. All right, well, this is a wrap. You guys have been awesome. This entire forum has lived up to everything the leadership team had envisioned and put through. We want to see it carry forward. We're looking forward to your participation next year and through the year. These are not just, this is not just a singular event, but something that we all envision to be continuing through the year to foster education and a lot of energy around new ideas, technologies, and expertise. And we're really looking to the Chicago market to pick it up. And Rafi brings a huge gap that we have here in the state of Illinois, which we need to correct. And you heard a few things going on from the state and in Chicago with Matter. We look forward to partnering with them on a much bigger stage to actually get things going. And our industry supporters and our academic supporters have always been there. We just need to break down a lot of the silos to get things going. So I really appreciate all the energy that you guys had. It's been a wonderful day and until last night as well. And I want to thank the AHA, Nancy Brown, for her vision to allow this to increase in its value and its footprint. All of the AHA staff, the executive leadership team, which I couldn't have done anything without, and for all of you for participating in this event. And we look forward to the after event where all the networking goes, and you're going to actually get a lot of length and a lot of footprint out of that as well. So thanks so much, and enjoy your weekend. Thank you.